Welcome to the SharkPod, the podcast that explores business and lifestyle design in Ireland and beyond. And now, live from Greystone Studios, here are your hosts, Luke Curry and Mark Baker.
What is up, SharkNation? So I'm here with our friend Jamie White, who's joining us remotely because this is I think it's week 4. Mark, is it week 4 of the Corona shutdown?
Yeah, I think we have a few more weeks to go for lockdown now, but our lock-in we're calling it. But
the lock-in. I think, you know what, guys? I think that this is the first time in maybe 5 years where I felt this week that there was some challenges on the horizon. I feel like I've been cruising for about 5 years, Mark, where I just doing well with everything that I was trying and all that type of stuff. But I think this one, I was writing it off a little bit at the beginning, but I feel like this might be the one that we need to, get going on here.
yeah, well, resistance makes you stronger, Luke. That's how you grow.
Yeah, I'm loving the little bit of resistance. I'm biting down on the gum shield. Let's go for it. I'm pumped. But we'll talk about that later on in the the conversation here. Jamie, thanks very much for joining us here today. Jamie's an entrepreneur. Seriously interesting story. Like he said, you're only 32 now. I was looking at your LinkedIn. It looks like you've been doing stuff for years and years and years at this stage. And it's been kind of a theme of the podcast as well. We've been talking to people who are in business for a long time, but are still, have a lot of career ahead of them, which is great. So Jamie, maybe we might just dig into the origin story a little bit, but I do have a lot of interest in kind of everything you've ever done. So I'd like to dig into different areas as well. Where did you go to school?
I was in Clongowes. Do you know in Kildare, the boarding school?
I do. I think I went to to do weddings there in the chapel.
Sometimes, yeah. I always wonder. It's a lot of the students will go back and have their weddings there.
Yeah,
I'd be too quick myself now, but they're running back. Good on them.
Yeah, absolutely, cool. And so, where did you go to college then afterwards?
So I went into UCD,
Nice.
which was it wasn't the contrast I was looking for. Like in boarding school, we went to mass every day. At weekends, we didn't get out. We'd stay in. We'd watch a movie. And
Prepared you for this then, Jamie, did it?
Actually, absolutely. I was actually chatting with one or two friends about this. I'm actually really enjoying this kind of lock-in. I'm semi-realizing that I might be a little bit reclusive. But this is actually quite nice for me at the moment.
Nice. So it's weird that you said that you're reclusive, because I guess your first career move was when you were in college, you were organizing parties, and that kind of exploded into kind of a proper business around event management and stuff like that while you were still in college, right?
Yeah, that was mental. The kind of context I was giving in boarding school is a lot of frustrated weekends staying in when any of your mates from home were out. So by the time I got to college, I was about to take off like a rocket, or wanted to take off like a rocket, but the social scene wasn't quite what I hoped it would be. And very much, rather than going without, I started hosting parties, and initially in my literally our back garden at home, and then that graduated to the local nightclub. And I stumbled upon a strategy that worked, and it was like we kind of found something that worked and applied it to something else and something else. And literally 2 years later, I was hosting 30 of these club nights a week, which was, it's kind of one of the more interesting things I think in any kind of entrepreneurial journey is you never actually appreciate what you're doing when you're doing it. And at the time I took such a casual approach to it, but I look back now and go like, wow, that was amazing. We were doing them all over Ireland, went up to Northern Ireland, even went as far as the Netherlands hosting these student club nights, which was great fun. And then we kind of graduated into, we did everything from your kiddie discos to your school discos to your college nights to your kind of more corporate nights. And then we started going into concerts. We hosted some of the biggest DJs in the world. Everybody from Hardwell to Nicky Romero to Vinci Vegas from Mike to MK, to Lee Foss, Felix the Housecat. I'm completely name dropping, but I was a complete fan, and it was so cool, age 22, 23, 24, to be doing all this kind of work. It was really, really fun. Yeah. And it was kind of testament to that. If you do something that you love, you won't notice it. we worked really hard, but we were doing phenomenally well and having a huge amount of fun in the process as well, which was cool.
That's such a rare thing as well, to be able to have that much fun while building a real business. Like when you were your first kind of real event that you put on, was that something that you just kind of sold tickets for, or did you also like how does that kind of business work? Do you get a cut of the door? Do you have to pay rent? Just as a, like, how does that actually set up, you know?
Yeah, so everyone is completely different. The first event I actually hosted was in the Sugar Club. Do you know the Sugar Club on Leeson Street? And guy Oisin, the general manager at the time, he'd only give me the club at 12 o'clock. So my brand of nights was called Midnight Events, because they started at midnight. Nice. And the first gig was with the Coronas, the band. And I was watching too much of the OC. I don't know if you remember the OC, but they always used to go to this bar with bands playing. When I went to college, there was no bar with bands playing. So I was like, here, let's take all these cool bands from all the different colleges. Let's bring them together once a week. And it sounded like a good idea, but I very quickly actually lost all my cash. It was just...
That was a fictional bar, Jamie.
I know, but I loved the idea, but I just thought, like, to be fair, the OC did it very, very well. They had the Killers on it.
Oh, yeah.
Grills. They had loads of really cool bands. But
the OC, like, we're from the same generation. That really impacted the way I don't know what it is. Loads of people have mentioned the OC on the podcast or just in passing. Like, you know, I think when you go to California and then there's, you know, a lot of homeless people and stuff, you're like, where's Marissa? And where's all the pretty people?
Why didn't that work out from a financial point of view? What was the key thing that went wrong?
I think it's like everybody in their first venture of business. They look at all the areas where they're going to make money and all the areas where they're going to have fun, and they aren't conscious whatsoever of the costs, the really, really obvious costs, and also the hard work. And there's also this kind of instinctive nature to think everything's going to go really well. So if you've got 100 tickets that can sell, you're like, okay, so I'm going to sell 100 tickets and I'm going to make this much money. And you forget that you might not sell 100 tickets, and you have to print those tickets. You have to print marketing materials. You have to rent the venue. You have to support the band. You have to pay for drinks for the band. And I just, unfortunately, I went into it, as I said, with that very kind of excited approach, and just completely forgot, oh shit, the band need an extra mic, that's 50 quid. Oh, the band want a couple of rounds of drinks, that's 150 quid. And before I knew it, just one cost went up on top of another, and it was a mess. But it's like all things, you know, if you want to get into a space, you have to learn. And what's brilliant about the event space is you learn really, really quick. You know, if you're throwing an event every week you learn some lessons. Every week you get an opportunity to kind of learn from them, apply them to the next week, and hopefully progress from there. And after a couple of instances, pivoted, went into a kind of a more kind of New Year's Eve ball or event. And that was commit yourself to a whole load of costs, sell a whole load of tickets in time to be able to pay those costs as they come in, and hope that you profit at the end of the day. There's loads of different ways you approach events in terms of, you know, percentage splits with partners, rental fees, upfront costs, and there's a whole load of different financial ways you can run an event, and you've kind of got to trial and experiment to find what works for you, which is exactly similar to so many other entrepreneurial spaces.
There's so much risk involved, though, isn't there? Like a lot of guesstimates. Like, 'cause we had a launch event for our business, and it was in the Westin Hotel, big ballroom there, and you're saying, oh, I think let's say 300 people said they'd come, you know, committed to or emailed back or whatever way they did it, but definitely said they'd come. I think maybe 220 came. Do you know, like, there's always a percentage that will actually come based on what they said they would.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables in events, and to be honest, one of the more interesting things I think is just yourself, your own stress capacity. Because at the end of the day, when you invite people in or you charge people to come to something, there's an expectation there that it's worthwhile for them to come. And that's all hanging on yourself. And if you deliver on it now, if you nail it, people are very grateful, people are very appreciative, and there's a real buzz off the back of that. But if you don't, you know, what you talked about there, where you're guesstimating the amount of numbers that are coming in for the drinks, for the food, for the everything. If you get those guesstimates wrong, if, say, for example, say you don't have enough food, you don't have enough drink, you don't have enough actual space for everybody to fit into, there's only one place where everybody looks, and you've got to take that on your shoulders. So there's no hiding from your responsibilities and from your decisions. When you throw an event, you either nail it and everybody likes you, or you fuck it up and everybody wants to kill you.
Okay. Out of all of the different types of events you're doing, you mentioned you're doing some corporate stuff, you're doing like devs, pre-devs, kiddie discos, all that type of stuff. Which one was there anyone that you liked the most, or you said, okay, this is the one that if you were to build a business, you know, over 20 years, this is the one you'd focus on? Or was there enough in any one area that you could do that?
Wow. Okay. So the contrasts in age groups were really interesting. So like, say like the kiddie discos for second years, so 13, 14-year-olds, they were lovely. They were actually really nice because, you know, parents dropped the kids off. No, like parents dropped the kids off. The nights were really innocent. You know, you gave out kind of prizes and sweets and everything. And what I was always amazed about was the contrast between a second year night and a third year night. Third year night, they were like skull and naggins in behind, getting up to all sorts. And you'd walk out just almost in shock. That contrast was very interesting. Nights with 6 years were mad because they just the amount of aggression, they just kicked the shit out of each other. But bought tickets at a crazy rate. College nights were fun. College nights were wild, and college nights you just never know what the hell might happen. The ones that I loved the most it was this project. It was called Residence, and basically myself and the business partner at the time, a guy called Mark Jacobs, we were doing all these different nights in different areas. You know, all the kiddie nights, club nights, student nights, and they were real cheap. You know, it just was what they were. You know, they were always kind of just, let's see what we can do here, and we wanted to. You know, we probably wouldn't have admitted it at the time, but now in reflection, it's really obvious. We wanted to show off. We wanted to say, look, this is what we can do. I think a lot of the time when we were bumping into family and friends, they'd always say, oh, are you still doing those kiddie disco kind of things? And we were like, we'll show you. Yeah. And Residence was that. We took over amazing venues. We brought in all the different production, all the fancy lights, all the effects. We brought in the world's biggest DJs. And we hosted them for quite intimate numbers. So say, for example's sake, like a DJ like Hardwell, he was the #1 DJ in the world at the time. And we brought him in for a club show with 1,000 people. And that kind of intimate club experience was incredible. That
experience probably doesn't exist in any other place. Like that's at that time with 1,000 people.
You know, in Ireland, when they do similar, to make it work, you know, you can't do all the bells and whistles. You can't do the hostesses. You can't do the CO2 cannons and the confetti blasters and all that kind of stuff. We didn't look at it so much as a kind of a money maker. We looked at it as let's show off the best event we can do in this space. And we kind of figured, look, you know, we'll make our money on the other nights. Let's just make these as good as they can be. And they were brilliant because whereas before friends didn't come to the nights that we were hosting, they all came in droves then. And it was really nice to enjoy it together with them. And for our teams that worked on the other nights, it was like a kind of a get together. So that was a really enjoyable period. Those were the fun ones to look back on.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's something that when you go to, I used to go to these nights as well when I was in college. I probably went to a few years over the years. Like I always liked having like an event to go to rather than just a night at a club. Do you know that kind of way? Like when you have a ticket for something, I actually like that because you like you're saying, you do expect a little bit more, or you expect a little bit more organization or whatever. I think there was a big one that when I was very young. I was probably part of that aggressive 60 year band that you were talking about there. I was very friendly, but it was in Bondi Beach Club. Do you remember that?
Yeah, so that's where we started all our nights.
Was it?
Yeah.
Were you guys the beach party guys?
So we did a few of the beach parties. The club kind of notoriously did it themselves. We actually did a very funny thing. They didn't realize that at the time they had a beach, and we said, look, it'll be amazing if we do a foam party at the beach. And it sounded like a great idea, but what we didn't realize is the foam, with whatever way it mixed with the sand, it actually solidified into a cement. The guys had to get diggers in to pull out all the sand. It was hilarious cement. But yeah, that was good fun.
But mistakes of ambition are fine, Jamie. That's what I always say. That your heart was in the right place. You wanted to have a good time, and you don't know the chemistry behind sand. You know what I mean?
It was just very funny because when those nightclubs end, there's basically like a quick cleanup that they do, and everybody just wants to go home. Then the next day they come in and they properly redo up the venue and everything, get it ready for the next day. And anyway, when they came in, there's no niceness in nightclubs. You get a phone call and it's like, what the fuck? Yeah, get your ass down here. that was one of the funnier phone calls I've gotten now in that space.
Okay.
Lucky people weren't throwing sand at each other.
No, they were actually towards the end of the night, they were kind of getting stuck.
The next event's called quicksand.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm always sorry, look, Jamie. I'm always interested in the kind of the lifespan of a nightclub. Do you know, if you look back, say I'm probably around 4 or 5 years older than you guys. It was, let's say, mine were Paparazzi's in Dunleary, Nemo's in Dunleary. Then it was Bondi. I was at some of those beach parties. Then it was Club 92.
Yeah.
And then it was Town. And then Town just took over. And why do all those? Do you know why those clubs didn't work?
Yeah. So
or they only had a glory days of 5 years. It's weird.
Yeah, there's loads of different theories on this. Obviously, when things are new, there's a buzz about them, and that fades over time. But also, whenever you bring somebody in, there is an opportunity to kind of win them over and to look after them. And I think sometimes a lot of greed kicks in the nightclub space, and a lot of corners are cut. Frustratingly, in the industry here in Ireland, a lot of corners were cut. So say, for example's sake, when the recession kicked in, what I thought was interesting was a lot of bars. So we're all familiar with bars and nightclubs. When the recession kicked in, bars didn't change their prices, didn't change anything. And a lot of them closed down as a result. And they moved to new owners. And the new owners, they invested in, they brought in really good food, they brought in really good atmosphere. You're looking at the likes of House, 37, the standard of bars just really, I think, went through the roof off the back of that kind of transition that happened in the recession. Yeah. In Ireland, what happened with a lot of the nightclubs was that the owners cut their drinks prices, and they retained their audience. So at the start of the recession, the first year or two here, bar numbers dropped incredibly, but nightclub numbers didn't actually. And because clubs went from charging €10 in to €5 in, drinks went from being €5 a drink to $2.50 a drink, €2 in some cases, €1 in some cases. And the nightclub owners, they survived, but they cut the shit out of their margins. And they cut every corner to be able to keep going. And over time, although they retained their audience, they pissed them off. They stopped looking after them. And it was so interesting for me, being really bang in the middle of that industry, to see the market shift away from the pubs into the clubs, to then get really, really pissed off with the clubs and move into the pubs, and then the clubs really to be awful. And they lost all their profitability, then they lost their market, and then one by one they started closing. And of course the numbers kind of concentrated on the few that survived, and they've tweaked up, and the market will turn. But that was fascinating to see.
It's so fascinating because when you're in the club, you're saying, you're paying like €7 for a gin and tonic, or now just before this, this may be a recession that's happening as we speak. Just before this, the drinks had got up to a point. It's almost like you can track the how well the society is doing by drink prices, and then I'm sure the €12 gin and tonics will take a little break over the next quarter or so. So I think there'll probably be a new reset here, and maybe there is some opportunity for somebody to step in after this and give exceptional value or do something different.
There is so much, whereas, other recession kicked in quite gradually, or other like effects like what we're seeing right now came quite gradually. This literally came in the space of a week.
It's crazy.
And there's no doubt in times like this, the market turns on its head. Opportunities are there for the taking, and there's a huge transfer of wealth. So like your audience is aspiring entrepreneurial types and existing entrepreneurial types. Now is the time to lay a foundation, is to really like capitalize on an opportunity. So yeah, it's kind of I have a community of friends all in this space, and they all literally have their eyes peeled, looking at all, trying to read how things are and how things will be as a result. What's fascinating for me is just the digital transformation. The way everybody has hopped up online. Nobody thinks you have to meet. I don't know how many meetings I've had back to back now off the back of this, and actually my days are becoming much more efficient and productive. Which is kind of, not quite what people would have thought, but I think a lot of businesses are seeing that actually productivity can be maintained, if not increased. So yeah, no, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting transitions off the back of this and really exciting opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Like even I have a feeling that once people see how productive, like I said, that they can be working from home, kind of managing their own time a little bit better, this might be a real revolution for people working at home, and it's going to be hard to get them back on a dart for an hour and a half every morning. If
I think there's so much. I think as well, like if you look at the desk prices, like if you go to WeWork or if you look at any of the iconic units, the average kind of desk price is about 600 to 750 quid a head per month. And I think, if companies are looking at their employees and they're more productive at home, they're happier because they're not going through that horrific commute where it's lashing rain, they get, buses missing or all that kind of stuff. And they can save 600 or 700 quid per head per person.
Still there, Luke?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, did I become a robot? Because everyone else did.
Wait, you just went silent. No, I was thinking on the office space thing. So if you have, say, 10 employees, maybe now some people might get an office with 5 desks and then rotate, the order in which people come in. So there's only 5 people at any one time in the office.
Yeah.
I think of the saving they'll make.
Or, do you know what? I honestly, like, I think sometimes, like, certainly for me, I went on from the club nights and went into media and went into marketing. And at one stage I had like 40 people. And I think a lot of the time, you look at the likes of LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all these tech businesses, and they're fantastic offices with gyms, with restaurants, with, in fact, some of them even have bars in them. They're just mental. And you think, well, that's the way work should be. But, I think it's awfully attractive, the idea of having a very lean business where, there isn't any set working hours. There isn't any set office. People just get stuck in. They can clock up as many hours as they want. They can really push a project forward. And I'm hoping there's going to be a rethink in that space, because being honest, like when I look back at the last couple of years of having a team and having a business, I actually felt like I wasn't really able to get stuck in. There was specific working hours, specific the location, the just the commutes, the HR issues, and all the kind of the things one needs to be conscious of. That in running a business, I didn't get to actually do any business. I was so busy just trying to make sure that the environment was working. And if it wasn't that, it was team nights out for drinks or team adventures or this kind of thing. And I'm hoping that a bit of that is going to get pushed aside, so actually people that want to work can just bloody get stuck in and work. Sometimes there's just too many obstacles in the way, and I really felt like that over the last couple of years. I was like, this is bullshit. I feel like I want to get stuck in, but my hands are tied behind my back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think especially for companies who like between 10 to say 30 employees, it makes sense even to do a hybrid of working from home or and working in the office. But the larger companies, I can understand they need a large office to kind of keep an eye on people as well. You forget some people, not everybody works the same as everybody else or you and I. So there is an element of Big Brother has to keep an eye on people as well.
Do you know, though, some of the tracking systems, the likes of which they have in, say, Google, are just incredible.
Oh, really?
Oh, they can, like, everything is tracked. Everything is tracked against your counterpart in different countries, so they can see your productivity. They can see if you're slacking or not. They can measure everything. That a company like that could go remote pretty much overnight. I know I have a couple of friends and kind of on high up levels in some of those tech businesses, and the learning off the back of this so far has been, we don't need big offices. So I'm that's the thing I'm fascinated about. Like in a month, 2 months, 3 months time, when we can all go back to normal, what does that normal look like? And I definitely think a lot of businesses will be saying, look, we need half the amount of office space that we needed. And then what results from that? Well, hell, if people don't need to be coming into work every day, they don't need to be living so close to town today. Does that mean that perhaps COVID has overnight solved the Dublin property crisis? That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Like I work, like I said before we went on, I work at HubSpot. So they just opened a HubSpot house, which is huge, new space, and it is beautiful, really, a great place to work for sure. But like I said, a lot of it's kind of, with this change now, a lot of the stuff that's in there is designed to keep you there as long as possible.
Yeah,
that's it's no secret. That's like, they want you to be comfortable there for long periods of time. You know, be able to, they serve, like, they've got their own chefs there now, so you don't have to go out for lunch. So I usually just grab something there, go back to the desk. Keeps me productive. They've also got stuff like a tap with sparkling wine at the bar. I'm not sure if that is a good thing for me. That's just a personal thing, you know. No, but I would forego that to be able to have the freedom to, because I live in Greystone, so it's a pretty big commute for me. Not huge. I know a lot of people have worse commutes for sure, but it's kind of like an hour each way at least. But now that I'm working from home every day, I'm getting down to the seafront for lunch, you know, and I'm way happier with that.
We're tribal though as well. Like, humans are tribal animals, but at the same time like autonomy and freedom. So it's that weird mix, which maybe, I don't know, a hybrid of both.
Absolutely. So
either way, we're thinking differently, which is the exciting thing. And you know, even watching, you know, a lot of friends, week one, they were going absolutely bloody mental in this lockdown. Week two, they're probably going a little bit more mental. Third week's starting to calm down. Fourth week, really calming down. Like I'd be interested to see the amount of mental health issues that absolutely were going crazy weeks 1 and 2, but were perhaps sorting themselves out weeks 3 and 4. You know, people who perhaps haven't connected with their family. You know, whether they like it or not, 4 weeks in, you're going to start really connecting again. I'm excited about a lot of that. You know, people, this natural slowdown that's come, time to think for yourself undistractedly. Like, perhaps a lot of people will be realizing, geez, I don't like what I'm doing. They'll make better decisions for themselves because they have the space to make those decisions. That all, again, I think is going to be incredible. Probably with a bit of distance, maybe a year, 2 years, we'll look back at this and go, Jesus, that kicked a really enormous shift. One thing's for sure, I definitely don't think things will just go back as normal.
Yeah. I think it's giving people time to think about the why. Why are they doing what they're doing? What do they really want to do? And on that, I suppose, Jamie, what is your why? Where did it all stem from, being an entrepreneur? See the way I tied it in there?
Yeah, I like it.
It's there. Wow, what's my why? It's cliche. It's Les Brown's great story where he talks about sitting on the end of your deathbed and being surrounded by all your unfulfilled potential. And for me, I get very excited when I think into myself and I'm like, Jesus, the stuff we could accomplish together. And I talk to myself like there's about 20 different people inside here.
Nice.
Is this recent?
It's a shark tip right there.
But I love that. I love that story that he tells, and I find that very, very motivating. Even at the kind of the darkest of times, when you're like, you know, 1 second, you're better than this. And so that kind of why. I think there's no greater gift that you can give to the world than your best self, and your best self is the greatest gift you can give to yourself. In terms of, you know yourself, when you're not performing at your best, you feel shit as a result. But when you realize your potential, whether you like it or not, there's something that starts to really fire inside you. And that's really, really exciting stuff for me. And I felt very sad over the last couple of years because just like I kind of get quite excited by things. So I can unconsciously find myself spread across a number of projects. And when you're spread too thinly, like all things we know, we just don't perform at our best. And I found myself not performing at my best, and I made myself sick, and I did all sorts of silly things. I've actually spent literally the last kind of 6 months almost clearing my plate, because I want to be able to focus, and I want to be able to realize that best self again. Because I think people can become obsessive about, productivity hacks, and then they get into biohacks. But they forget that probably one of the biggest hacks you can do is just actually raise your standards. You guys touched on Tony Robbins. What does he see? Step up, set a new standard. And I think that's amazingly self-serving.
Absolutely.
So it's a long answer to one's why, but I hope we've covered it in some way.
And you also touched on clearing your plate a little bit and stuff like that. And I noticed that through the background that I was looking into, you actually started another company after the nightclub business, where it was more of a media-based business, and then you went on to sell that, and then you sold your last business recently as well. So when you're starting your businesses, are you thinking of building a business that's saleable or sellable? Saleable, is it? Yeah.
Like, you know what? Honestly, I'm always conscious of a story. So if a business sells for €1, fuck it, it's still sold.
Yeah.
And,
Mark, this is great stuff. I love the story. The story is the most important thing. That's what I was saying.
You know what? Like I think it's important not to get too wrapped up in one's own bullshit. And I like, when it came to the nights, I didn't think anything about starting them. Honestly, I found myself in the middle of them, and it was brilliant. And I learned really fast, because kind of what I touched on, some nightclubs you're working with some pretty tough people. And if you don't perform, if you don't bring in the numbers, the security guy will look at you and go, we didn't get our hours because you didn't do your work this week. And sometimes that can be pretty scary. The owner of the club can say, I lost a lot of money. I brought people in here and you didn't perform with the numbers. So you really learn a sense of responsibility in that respect. I found myself in a whole load of things, and I brought them together in Youth Nation. And Youth Nation was effectively a youth entertainment business, because we had all these nights. We actually had 20,000 people coming through our doors every week.
Wow.
We had 2 websites. One was called College Times and one was called Teen Times, effectively magazines for those generations. And we had about 1 million people on the sites every week. And what I felt is that if we created a marketing agency, which we did, that they could capitalize off the network and the insight we had to those audiences for brands' benefits. And that did really well at certain stages, but I was 25, 26, and managing a team that goes from 10 people to 42 people within a year is it was about 18 months. Sorry, it has its challenges, and unfortunately, I didn't manage that. So as high as we went up, we went down, and I kind of had to really problem solve then, because for the first time at one stage I was making so much money, crazy money, but then no, actually I found myself in a space where actually I owed people money, and so I had to kind of tidy up my affairs, and so that looked like closing some things down, and then others was packaging up. So we sold off the sites, College Times and Teen Times. Then I got into social media marketing agency, and as I said, kind of a few months ago, I realized, I'm spread across too many things. I need to concentrate on. I also think as well that when you start a business, it's you at the time. And if you leave that business and the business is still going on, it grows a bit of a life of its own, but it anchors you into who you were back then when you started it. And so sometimes a business can actually pull you back a little bit. And from moving on from it, it can actually, like holding a balloon underwater, the longer you hold it, obviously it starts to tire you out and everything like that. But the exciting thing is when you let go, boom, you take off like a rocket. And I hope I'm not speaking in riddles, but I hope the idea kind of clear.
No, it
up.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a story that I think is always important to serve. But in terms of business, in terms of just looking after whoever worked with you, looking after whoever you worked with, and moving on. But there is an entrepreneurial thought. Obviously, you build a business to sell it ultimately. For me, Mark, you're an artist, and I think good entrepreneurs should be like artists. Their work should be a reflection of their heart, their spirit, their soul. I'm probably getting a little bit off here, but I actually think if you want to realize your highest potential, everything has to be in alignment. And you can't just create some cookie cutter business. What you do has to be in alignment with yourself and a good, honest reflection of that self. And that's when you're able to work harder than anybody else. That's when you're able to persevere through what appears like absolute horrific nightmare kind of stuff. And anyway, so when I look at an entrepreneur, I think an entrepreneur is actually a very similar person.
Yeah, no, I've actually, that makes a lot of sense to me. Even to use art as an example, I found that, like, I do portraits. You've probably seen some of the stuff that I do, kind of realistic portraits, people I'm interested in. It might be like, say, Peaky Blinders. It's a great TV show. I've watched it. I just thought, I really have to get this out of my system to do this painting. And because I work all day and I have a business, it's between the hours of 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. is when I get to paint. That I've always found that no problem whatsoever. But at one stage a while ago, I thought I might try landscapes. You know, people love landscapes. I like landscapes. So I might give it a go. And I tried it, and after about a week, I just said, I cannot do this. I was almost falling asleep painting because the passion wasn't there. That flow state, I couldn't get into a flow state. I didn't enjoy. So just like a business that I didn't enjoy, I couldn't do landscapes. But the paintings, or the portraits, was completely different game.
And so many people are in that space as a norm, so they actually don't even notice that they hate what they're doing. They don't notice the resistance anymore. And you talked about a flow state. I'd actually say that that's just a normal state, but we're so used to being in a different world of distraction and drain that we actually think that our normality is flow and peak performance. And so I suppose going back to at the heart of that question, I nothing I've done I've kind of built to sell. I always kind of thought, oh, this is something I want to do. And as I said, I suppose when you're following your passions, that's why for me it was quite easy to get kind of excitedly into another thing and another thing and another thing. The same way, if you look at any of the kind of famous artists, they started painting one thing and then they didn't finish it, but they went into another thing and then another thing. And obviously that's not good, but it's mistakes that are made. And I kind of think then sometimes there's an artist gets a bit pissed off of kind of not realizing the potential as much as they should, having all these half done paintings, and they get them together, they move them on, and they get ready for their masterpiece.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Great stuff, Jamie. So the one thing that I did think was interesting as well, there's another thing I'm going to dig into here, but because I work with partners, like agency partners all over Europe in HubSpot, but I work with the technical ones. We have a big section of our businesses with marketing agencies who kind of sell HubSpot for a commission, that type of thing. So I've worked with those types of businesses for, say, the last 3 years, all over the Nordics, like all over the place. One of the things that I always found interesting was some of them did really well and some of them did really, really badly, as if they just had no business, like they were good at writing content, or there was no business area of that. Like when you started your marketing agency, and this is going to be interesting for a lot of our listeners, because talk to any of the 3,000 people who work in HubSpot, they all everyone had thought about starting an agency after working with these guys to say, I could do that, using HubSpot. But like, how do you sketch your first client? I think that's something that people could really benefit from in that space.
How do you get your first client?
Yeah. So say when you're brand new agency, are you digging into your Rolodex? Are you advertising? How do you get your first kind of client there?
For me, when I went into social media, the reason I did was I was in a bit of trouble, and I had previously hosted all these events, these concerts, all through social media. I then had built up these 2 websites, again, all through social media. And I'd always done everything for myself, but there was other brands that had come to me and said, look, could you please, could you do our social media? And it was something I'd resisted. But when you find yourself in a hole and you have to dig yourself out, it's like, okay, well, what are people asking for? People are asking for social media marketing. So interestingly, there was kind of like a primed audience already there, though we didn't know how to work with clients. We could do, it's a very interesting thing when the difference between actually doing something for yourself versus doing something for somebody else. So when you're doing something for somebody else, you have to explain every piece of it. You're also taking ownership, or say taking responsibility for whatever it is that they're asking you to do, that's theirs. So there's managing their kind of expectations, managing their vulnerabilities, their confidence, all that. So the first client or two that we got, we actually did the work for free, and we said, look, let's do the work for free. I think we can do really good work with you, but we've no experience in working with other people. So you're going to get really good, in our case it was a social media marketing business, so you're going to get really good social media marketing, but perhaps we're not going to work with you that well. And we need to sit down with you every couple of weeks, and we need really honest feedback in that regard. And let's say after 2-3 months of this, no doubt you'll be thrilled with the results, and we can look at a fee then. And that was the kind of way we started. So we started literally with like a barbershop and a cafe. And then a little bit later, we were able to work with some really, really cool brands. Yeah, I'm a big believer that slow and steady wins the race. And if you want to go far, go slow. And in a market where everybody is playing the short game, if you just play the long game, that in itself is a competitive edge. And so that little pause of taking a bit of time was invaluable. And people don't do it, but they definitely should.
Jamie, the long game, it's such a rare thing. So it's incredibly rare. I think, Mark, I think we talked about that before as well. Like,
what do you mean?
So when people are starting their business, when people are even like without going into, well, actually, I'm going to go into this. Some of the agencies I worked with in the Nordics, one in particular that is no longer a affiliate of HubSpot, or they're not working with us anymore, and they never actually got going. But every time we were trying to do a deal with the software, with the end user, like it was their first deal with HubSpot, and we're trying to get them going. But so they don't have the expertise, but they're charging 50 grand to get started, and they're like, who would pay that? You don't know what you're doing. Like, we have to build a bit of a portfolio here we can point at, So I was trying to get these guys to play the long game. I wasn't their partner manager or anything like that, so I couldn't really do anything with that. But I've come across a lot of businesses, a lot of people as well, that are trying to get going straight away. If you can take the time to do that was almost like a freemium model that works well for Slack, works well for these big tech giants, but you're shrinking that down to your own business and applying the freemium model to these barbershops, like you said. And after you've proved that, no one minds paying for a good service as long as it's proven. One of the biggest problems that we have is a lot of the times we ask for the money up front, and there's a risk involved, right? So I think playing the long game could be a shark tip of the week here. Yeah.
It's for me, what's interesting as well is that when you work with bigger brands, it's very easy to actually be crap, because there's such long chains of command on their side, and there's such detachment. Whereas if you let's say, for example, work with a restaurateur who has spent his life savings on that restaurant, the restaurant is a reflection of his life. He's mortgaged out of the hilt, and if you do a good job in the marketing, they'll be full, and if you do a bad job, they'll be empty. If you do a good job, he'll invite you in for a meal and you'll be best friends. If you do a bad job, he'll be knocking on your door at like 12 p.m. on a Saturday night wanting to cut your throat. And actually that's where you're going to learn really, really fast. And that's where you're actually going to feel the results of your work. Like, for me, I loved our business when we were working with a lot of owner managers as a social media agency. As we grew and we started working with bigger brands who had, a marketing manager, then a marketing executive, and then a marketing executive, that you're so far down the pecking order that just so many cool campaigns get completely lost. And there's such time delays and everything that it was just boring. But that long strategy of just appreciating that if you're getting into a space, you have to learn it, and you have to pay a little bit for that, but that'll stand to you in the long run is key.
So social media is obviously so important for new companies and SMEs. What's some of the kind of tips that you could give for, say, a business starting off? What's the do's and don'ts? I think people, there's lots of things people do wrong. They hesitate posting content. I think they overanalyze each post, where I think more content, if it's valuable, the better. I'd be attention to detail. I think it has to be good, the aesthetics. What's some tips for a good social media presence for an SME?
So I actually, even before I kind of get into that, what I would say is one of the more interesting, I used to do these talks all around the country, kind of broad with it loads. And it's, essentially social media strategy for business and getting going on social media. And the thing I always used to start the talks with was I'd ask, all those with a successful business to stand up. And I'd ask all those with a successful business who are on social media to sit down. And, there'd be, say, in a room of 100, there'd be 20, 30, 40 people standing up who had successful businesses that weren't on social media. And I'd say, look, everybody give them a round of applause. For some reason, everybody that feels they're in business feels that they need to be on social media. And, social media isn't some kind of obligation that you need to be on social media. It's an opportunity. And it's either there for your business or not. But oftentimes it can be a huge distraction. So a lot of, I was speaking with this amazing woman earlier on the week. She runs a hummus and pesto company, and she's been through.
They'll do great in Greystones.
Yeah, competitor to the Pear guys, and she was through like the super value food program, which is amazing here in Ireland for any kind of food producers. And we were chatting exactly about this. And she said, Jamie, when all my competitors were out, perfecting their social media posts and getting tied up in PR, I just picked up the phone and did a really good deal with such and such a supermarket and such a supermarket. And she's in a position now that regardless of her marketing, she's selling a huge amount of units. And now the marketing can come. So marketing has its place. A lot of people think it's upfront, it's immediate. I would argue that it actually can be quite distracting from getting the very fundamentals in place. And so I'd always, it's probably why I kind of had to move aside in the agency, because a lot of the time I'd push clients away. I'd be like, no, look, this isn't the right time for you. You need to focus in on this first.
So you're trying to fix their business first before, and they're like, no, you're doing this, go back and get a couple.
A business that's going nowhere is not going to be very valuable to an agency.
Yeah, but a business that's going nowhere and a business owner that has a business that's going nowhere can fool himself by really good marketing and fool his friends, and that comes up a lot. A lot of people overindulge in their marketing. For me, my heart is in the overall. I love that word holistic, which is all encompassing. And when it comes to business, I love everything. I love thinking about the people, thinking about the processes, thinking about the geography of it, thinking about the opportunity now versus the long term. I hate being confined to just marketing or even just social media marketing and the whole marketing scope. And it has its time and its place. And most of the time for those smaller start-off businesses, it's a distraction, and it's a distraction that in no way delivers the ROI that should justify it. So a big encouragement to a lot of businesses was, do you actually need to be on social media?
Yeah. It's the equivalent of wanting to start a business and just getting your business card and looking at it and thinking you're great.
Exactly. It is the modern day business card. And, like the real exciting thing is it's doing the deals. It's getting those done. And nothing, like at the end of the day, people work with people. They don't work with fancy social media platforms. However good a social media platform might be, if there isn't a good person to work with behind that and a good opportunity, affect that. Whereas people will work with the good opportunity and the good person, social media aside. So I know I can go through the whole tips thing if you want, but I think that in itself is actually one of the more effective tips, is just, do you need to be here? I think, there is so much excitement. There's such a buzz around entrepreneurship, and so many people get into it without thinking enough about it. But if people actually just did scrutinize some of the decisions and say, do I actually need to do this? I think they'd speed up their journeys phenomenally, and they'd also save a lot of money in the process.
So interesting. Because I obviously had a lot of these conversations with marketing managers, director of marketing for larger companies, but also I worked at SMEs in the Nordics as well for a few years. So one of the biggest things is the CEO or the kind of managing director. When you talk to those guys, they're looking for ROI this month on ads that you're running. And then the marketing guys are looking for, brand awareness, for example, which is a little bit harder to really nail down. So what do you think is more important? Did you prefer to work on projects where there was a clear ROI, where you had a call to action in a social media post that drove ticket sales or drove unit sales on something, or was it a little bit more fun to work on the bigger picture branding stuff?
Interesting. So I'll challenge that. And so I've had so many conversations where marketeers are looking at business owners and they're like, no, let's look at the bigger picture. Let's talk about your story and let's get people engaging with that story and let's create a buzz around that. Whereas at the end of the day, the business won't be a business unless it's doing business. And so everything that you do has to deliver and justify itself. And that's why I'd say, certain things have their time and place. And so initially up front, you're looking at everything and going, okay, well, is this going to deliver a profit? Is this going to justify it in terms of its cost per acquisition? And I just think if you take a step back when you're thinking bigger picture, it's not thinking, hey, let's tell the story which will lead to this, which will lead to this, which will lead to this. It's what can we do now? And we need to progress the business and we need to generate business in terms of generate money in. Okay, well, what can we do to do that? Let's look at all the options for right now. And out of all those options, what's going to deliver the highest ROI based on those KPIs we're looking for? And okay, that and that work, these others don't. Take them out of the picture. Everything has its place though. Social media comes in and can be of huge value at the right time. Search can be of huge value at the right time. Influencer marketing, similarly, they all have their timing, but people don't think of them enough. They just think, let's activate every marketing medium we can all at once. But in actual fact, as I said, they have their times, and if you activate them and turn them off at the right times, you can have a really, really efficient campaign.
Interesting. And marketing, it's not going away. It's going to evolve. It's going to be something that we also have to get ahead of. I think, Tony Robbins, I know he comes up on this podcast a lot, Mark. I don't know, you're kind of just getting into to Anthony right now. So I'm going to, maybe be pushing that on you a little bit. There's plenty of books around that house that you're living in. But his big thing is all business is innovation and marketing. They're the two things that we need to really focus on. So we need to have something that's a little bit different, and then you got to market the hell out of it, because no one is going to know about your great innovation if you're not telling people effective. So,
like marketing is beautiful when it's done with the right people. And there's unfortunately for some reason a lot of people think, oh yeah, sure, you go into marketing, let's just throw you into marketing. And they've kind of discredited the space, and they've also kind of blurred the space a little bit. But think about marketing. How do you define it? How do you break it down? It's creating value. How do you create value? Well, you have a really, really good product. You really refine the product. You research into the audience to figure out, okay, what are those competitive edges that we need to introduce? Marketing, it's how it looks, it's how it feels, it's how it's communicated. It's so much more, I think, than people actually appreciate. And I don't think marketing is as appreciated as it should be here. And also as well, it's populated with perhaps a lot of people that have given that reason, that have created that issue. But anyway, I'm down a fucking funnel here. I better pull myself back up. But I can talk on and on and on in that area.
You mentioned cleaning your plate or clearing your plate. Where's your focus on right now? Is it you have fresh resolutions, the Start Summit? Tell us more about them. Is that where you're focusing at the moment?
Yeah. So I'm really interested in. I wanted to kind of get focused in on myself a little bit, and as I said, the more I focused in on myself, the more I realized, Jesus, I'm really spread, and so I wanted to clean that up. And I wanted to get in touch in terms of, what do I buzz off? What do I enjoy? And there's a couple of things that I love. I do love that kind of big business consulting. I've been able to work with business owners and work with them on their businesses. And that's something that I love. Kind of have so that's me on a kind of a personal level. With others, then I love kind of bringing different people together. I love making introductions, love connecting people. And, that's at the heart of events. Essentially, you're bringing lots of people together. You're having them, share messages and introduce them and all that kind of thing. So I cleared my plate. I've kind of done a bit more. I've done a good bit of work on myself in terms of a personal focus, and you know, I learned from people, so I've created a kind of a personal mechanic to do that. In terms of, if you go on my site, I with my own podcast similarly, where it's essentially meeting people, hearing their life story, the lessons they've learned along the way. That's really enjoyable, and I've set it up in a way that's very easy to do, so it doesn't kind of distract from the bigger picture, but it complements it.
Do you think you were missing that along the way in your early 20s, mentor? It sounds like you were making mistakes and learning from them, as opposed to learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, do you know what? Unfortunately, I touched on it with the nightclubs that I said, you know, like I stumbled into it and they started to do really well, and I didn't appreciate all that goes into that. Unfortunately, I think when you do well and young, you build a lot of really bad qualities. So I became an arrogant shit. And instead of listening to those around me, I was like, "Sure, what do you know?" And that's why I kind of push that message of slow and steady wins the race. If somebody, like, I always hate that when someone says, "Oh, I have no regrets." It's like, don't look at it so deeply. Like, you know, if you could do a few things differently, what would they be? And I'd like to have served a couple of apprenticeships under entrepreneurs. And I think, you know, all these really exciting young talents, instead of doing that, are all jumping into shit business versus, you know, the next shit business. And they're losing all their savings, they're losing their family savings, they're making all these horribly simple, easy mistakes that they'd be saved from by doing 6 months under a really cool entrepreneur. Or a year under. So if I could go back, I'd definitely serve the apprenticeships. If I could go back, I'd definitely have listened to a bit of the advice. My dad never said "I told me so," but my God, he really could. And so yeah, I wish I listened to a few people more. But that like in this kind of clearing the plate space, it's been really interesting. Like I've recruited my the guy who owns my firm of accountants. He's mentoring me in a kind of a business planning and financial sense. I've recruited one of my more challenging clients, who's also a business coach, to be essentially a business coach. I've brought in a lot of personal coaches and mentors. So there's huge value in accountability. You know, when you're following an entrepreneurial journey, it's all on your shoulders, and so the weight of progress moves at your own initiative, and that can be good at times, but I wanted to kind of bring in people to help me really step up. So anyway, what does that look like? Long story short, I've kind of focused in on myself, and I used to do a lot of speaking, doing a lot more of that. I used to do a bit of consulting, doing a lot more of that, and that's about 20% of what I'm doing. I say 70 because it's always good to leave 10% for a bit of fun. But the 70%, I'm building a new age chamber of commerce. I love the startup space. Reason being is because it's the simplest bit of advice that can make or break a business at that early stage. It's the simplest introduction that can accelerate a journey dramatically down the line or not. So the impact that you can have on businesses at an early stage is phenomenal. And there's that, you know, breakdown. 9 out of 10 businesses fail in their first year. 9 out of the subsequent one that gets through, in terms of 10, fails in their second year. So I think there's huge room to improve on those stats. So it's going to be called Startup Entrepreneurs Ireland. And it's going to be a new age business network where the events are all online, so you don't have to fucking trudge around town or anything like that. You can
as well these days.
The networking is all there, and
is it up online yet, or is it in its infancy still?
It's in its infancy. Do you know what I? Sorry, which?
Is this a SharkPod exclusive with this announcement, or isn't it?
Well, see, I'm one of those guys that can't keep my mouth shut, so like, you know, I can use any opportunity to talk. But no, I was going to move a little bit slower with it. I'm actually going to kind of really put the foot down, because I think it'll be of huge value and help to people at the moment. Because as I said, at the moment, for however horrific things are in some circumstances and however challenging all those new changes are, there's going to be a huge amount of opportunity. And with the right help and support, there's going to be a lot of really good, successful businesses and startups off the back of all this. So I'd love to be able to play a role in supporting and helping that.
And are they young businesses or young people in business?
Interesting. So I was only having this discussion earlier, yesterday with somebody. They were asking who's the target market. And for me, I want essentially people getting into their first business, or perhaps refining their first or getting into their second. And someone says, well, what the hell does that look like? I'm like, that could be anything from 16 to 66 in terms of age. But there's an interesting thing, I think, in that first business, people want to meet people want to learn, people are open to going to events. People actually really realize that, shit, I need to learn a lot. I think people in their third or fourth journey in business, they get a bit weathered. They're not interested in networking anymore. They don't want to be distracted. They just want to get stuck in and get going. So the focus is really, it's all ages, it's all all genders. It's so funny that you have to say all genders now, but it's all genders. God knows how many there are. And it is. Yeah, it's a wide span, but it's really those hungry, those starting off. I don't want to say entrepreneurs, because some people have a kind of a negative connotation to that, but it's essentially the people that want to get successful and want to get going in business.
Yeah, turning entrepreneurs into entrepreneurs, really. Exactly. You can have that tagline.
Jesus, who's the market here now? I'm like taking notes on the slide.
Cool. So I think that's such an incredibly powerful thing, and it's something that, for whatever reason, we haven't been great in Ireland in the apprenticeships outside of the traditional apprenticeships compared to places like where I've lived, like Canada. There's big kind of mentor meetup communities. Even there's an Irish Canadian meetup for business people in Vancouver, and it's people of all ages and genders, like you said, but like at different areas. Everyone's looking to help each other. And when it came back, that's not that it's not there, but it's not as advanced. Even in Germany, they do like I went to college with some Germans, and they've done 3 or 4 apprenticeships, in different industries, working for these kind of big family-owned businesses. Like all that type of stuff. Like it all goes into producing a more effective people, I think. And we seem to it's college, good job, and then just keep on plowing ahead, not really looking for, tapping into direction from the people who've already done what we want to do.
Yeah, it's it's like we're on a conveyor belt from the second we're born. You have all these different life stages that you need to get through, whether that's school to college to graduate program to graduate level entry to promotion, and then you hook up with someone, you go through the engagement, you go through the marriage, you go through the kids, you go through the mortgage. It is literally this conveyor belt that's quite hard to pull out of. And as soon as you pull out of it, there's the weight of that environment almost saying, well, Jesus, if you're not following the path, what the hell are you doing? And there's this huge pressure. And so if you do something out of the ordinary, well, you have to deliver on that right away. And so it forces this short term, I've got to be successful right away. I've got to prove everybody wrong. And I've got to show off that this was the right decision to make. And so it doesn't allow for people to go slow and steady on the entrepreneurial route. It instead forces them to fucking make perhaps bad decisions, to do anything they can to succeed ASAP, to get their parents off their back, to get their family and friends off their back. But again, going back to that slow and steady wins the race. If you want to go far, go slow. And if you want to be successful in business, if you're in that pressured environment, you're just not going to be successful. But yeah, if you could ring up the most successful entrepreneur and say, look, don't need any money. Hell, I've been paying to go to college, so I'll pay to do an apprenticeship with yourself. I will do anything and everything. I'd like to work with you for 6 months. And give me 6 months, and I guarantee by the end of the 6 months, you'll be dying to hire me. But I think even the attitude around apprenticeships is ridiculous. I had some arsehole ring me up and say, hey, I'd like to intern with you. And I said, oh, that's great. Well, let's have a chat. And then we had a really good chat, and it was great. And then at the end of it, he said, well, cool, look, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me, and I appreciate you making the opportunity for an internship and all that you're going to teach me. Now, in order to come in, I'd expect a minimum of 30,000. And I looked at him, and when somebody is so out of sync, it's hard not to want to like literally go back to your early school bullying days, pick them up and pretty much flush their heads down the jacks. But like, what a shit.
Yeah.
Because the fact, you know, like
Point.
they're completely missing the point. Actually, when you take in an intern, it costs you money. It's a distraction. It takes time to teach them, to show all they need to do. But that person should be so unbelievably appreciative and grateful. And it's not there. And I think it's so funny how people will think it's completely normal to pay to go to college and work a side job to get themselves through college. But then as soon as they go into work, they think, oh no, I should be earning right away. And it's like, no. I actually need to spend 6 months on teaching all that stuff that you learned to college because it's bollocks. And you need to learn how to work really, really well with me, which will cost me a fortune up front. But if we get it right, that's brilliant enough. I have that faith that you're going to have it right and you have that commitment to it. There's a long-term opportunity where you will earn so much more than you would otherwise.
Yeah. Value first, then you can ask for the cash later on.
Yeah. You can see that's a real, like, do you know what grinds my gears? My God, that's a passionate one for me.
Yeah. Actually, somebody reached out to me the other day asking for like a phone call on some guidance and stuff like that. We're getting into sales and stuff. So I'm going to call him and I'm going to tell him to drop out of college right now, go work for the best salesperson you can find, and you'll be absolutely fine. Don't care about what they'll pay or anything. Just if they want you to generate leads for them and they give you a phone, do it for a year. You can't not get good at something like that if you're working with the best. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. So I think he might have bit off a little bit more than he can chew, because I'm going to call him and make an impact there. So not that I want a lot of people reaching out doing that.
It's got Tony Robbins, you know, he talks about modeling when he was saying how he learned polo. But like, do you know, I always think a fee, like say if we go back to the social media days, if I charged one of those first owner manager clients, they never would have been able to afford us. But we never would have learned how to work with clients, and we would have gone to the market, worked with a big client, made a bollocks of it and closed the door. And, you know, the amount of times, you know, it's hard to turn somebody down that has a fire in their belly, that wants to get stuck in and say, look, I will work for you. I will work for free. It's hard not to respect them. It's hard not to open your door and say, right, come into my inner circle. Let me teach you everything. Yeah. It's certainly hard for me, because when I see that in somebody, I can't but highly respect it and say, right, cool. If you're going to put your heart and soul into me, let me do the exact same for you. But on the flip side, as I said, when those kind of crazy expectations come in and a completely unrealistic perspective on how things could be or should be, it's hard not to want to punch them straight there.
But the guy
look, I get people jobs for a living. That's what I do. And people who chase the money, and people versus people who go for the job that they want or the company that they want, or you know, got a good feel in an interview and thought, yes, these are the type of people that I could work for, and say it's $5,000 less than the other job that they could go for. They always end up actually making more money. Well, most of the time. There is a pattern recognition that I can see from years of doing this. So I tell people, go for the job that you want, not for the money, not for the extra. People will choose a job for an extra $2,000 a year. And I've had to break it down into tax, what that looks like per month or per week, and
nothing.
Everybody's different.
I've seen that so many times over, and it's heartbreaking the amount of people that leave jobs that they loved, with teams that they loved, in areas that they were doing so well, to go to another business for a couple of grand extra, where all they were thinking about was the money. And then suddenly they don't like the people they're working with. They don't like the work that they're doing. They start suffering as a result of that. They go half fucking depressed, and they wonder why they're depressed. They wonder why. It's like, from your perspective, dealing with the amount of people, I imagine it's just so unbelievably obvious. Yeah, no, I've had some amazing chats with recruiters in that space. I think it's so interesting how sometimes we just make such bad decisions for ourselves, and we don't lean into the others around us to get advice. I suppose becoming more and more conscious of it. That's why I can look back on my earlier years and kind of bang my head off the wall a little bit, and why now I'm so conscious of getting good people around me to lean on for good advice, because it saves you so much in the long run. Yeah.
Some of the, you mentioned with the events and the nights, you had some of the biggest names in music. you've had some big names in, you know, public speaking or motivation, speak at some of your events. Maybe we could have a quick chat about a few of them. I know Luke's interested in one or two in particular.
Yeah. Well, you tell me. Who do you want to talk about?
I was looking at the quick looking back video that you have on YouTube about the Jordan Belfort story, bringing him to Dublin. I remember this was a big. I'll tell you why this was a big deal to my kind of circle at the time. I was working at Davy Stockbrokers at the time, and I guess that was a bit of a target market for you for getting the people to go to this event. So I know we're over an hour now chatting, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we would just love to hear about where that came from, like what the story was to get this guy to Dublin and all that type of stuff. Because it was a 3,000 person event or something.
It was phenomenal. Now, I like, he came back again, to be honest, and his event was bollocks. But the first one was I didn't do him the second time. I was like, don't do him. So I watched that. I saw the trailers for the movie, and like, I don't know if you remember the advanced trailers for The Wolf of Wall Street, but like, whoa, they marketed it so well. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? And I started looking at him, and I was like, oh my God. And, you know, we were running a party business at that stage. We're like, I want to party with this guy. He seems incredible. This is my 25-year-old self. And when people ask me, you know, what you enjoy about work, I said, you know what, the most important thing that work should do for me is it opens up doors. And I was like, I'm going to party with this guy. So how can we party with this guy? Well, let's bring him over for a talk. And, you know, we'll bring him over the night before, we'll go out with them, and then we'll do the talk, and the talk will pay for it. And that'll be grand.
Yeah.
So started getting in touch with him, started mailing him, and that was the justification, which is completely ridiculous. His fees were absolutely ridiculous. And I remember my business partner, like, I was like, so I've got something to tell you. And Mark was very, like, I was the kind of like, we're going to do this kind of thing. And Mark was the facts, the figures, the kind of the much more, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it?
I know Mark like that.
And anyway, I remember being like, so I've taken this much money and I've put it in this account. And he was like, have you even checked the results? I'm like, have you checked the account? What the hell have you done? He went ballistic. But anyway, we got him over. It's actually nuts. I actually had to fly over. I before we signed the deal and put the money in the account, I was like, I want to meet you. I want to speak to you face to face. So I flew over to London, met him in I think like terminal whatever in
the airport.
In the airport, to have a quick sit down chat just to confirm that, you know, this is the guy and everything's legit. And from the day we signed the contract to when we hosted, it was 28 days. It could be 26, could be 27. I think it's 28.
Unbelievable.
And anyway, so we signed the contract, launched it. We put it in the RDS, 3,000 people. And we sold it. We sold it out. It was incredible. So the company, actually, the guy, you mentioned Tony Robbins, there's a guy called Michael Burnett who owns a company called Success Resources, who's the promoter behind most of Tony Robbins' shows. He was like, no one has ever sold, one, this much tickets at this price, and two, this many people in this short window. It's the most successful event Jordan's ever had. And anyway, so he came over, got to meet him off the back of it, which was cool. But yeah, it was deadly because it was so much because it hit just as the movie hit. So we didn't need to market it because the movie was doing all our marketing for us. We had all the excitement of all the different interviews, and of course Jordan's hilarious to work with because, you know, someone will ask a question. He's very like Trump insofar as like, how could you ask that kind of a question? You should be ashamed of yourself as a journalist. You're a disgrace. Fuck you. Bang. And he'd be texting him in the back and be like, Jordan, we just worked for a week to get you that interview with fucking Ryan Tuberty or Pat Kenny or somebody. It's like, what have you done? But like, so there was all that emotional roller coaster. And then there was we hadn't experienced in those kind of events. So like we turned all our nightclubbing team to this. So like the build was phenomenal. The media was phenomenal. The attention. We went from hosting, like students to fucking people from Davies coming in. So it was a complete contrast of audiences. And, but like, it was interesting. I think the audience was kind of split. Some of them wanted to learn his straight line sales process, and others just wanted to hear about him, playing darts with midgets. And there was that contrast in audiences. In the audience, and great buzz around the event. There's a picture up on my website. It's like the events picture, and you'll see like the audience is huge, and right bang there in the front row is my dad. And my dad brought like 6 of his close mates to it. And that was cool. I think, what makes us happier than making our families proud. And there was so much around that event. God, I'm probably chatting way off the lip. What are the things you want to know? And let me answer them.
Oh, basically told us everything there. The whole story. Like, it seemed like, was that the biggest kind of single event that you put on in that time, or was there?
That as a single event, yeah. Like, we were doing tours. Say, like, we did a tour all around Ireland with Dimitri Vegas and Mike, which was 5,000 people over 3 days. That was intense. And it's kind of funny, just the things that come up. Like, I remember getting a call from one of the DJs at 2 a.m, be like, "Can I have a toothbrush?" I was like, "What?" She's like, "There's no toothbrush. Could you get me a toothbrush?" And I was like, I think they were staying in the hotel by the Point. I was living in Dublin too. I was like, "Oh my God, get yourself a bloody toothbrush."
A few divas in there as well.
It's funny the things that come up, but yeah, no, that event with Jordan was definitely, like, we were doing a lot, but like 3,000 people. It was €100 price point. It was a very, an audience of kind of average age of say 30, so very different kind of audience, all national media, some international media. There was a big roller coaster around that. So yeah, it was definitely the biggest event we'd done at the time, and it was so cool.
So he's an interesting guy. I was telling Mark before this, I think I told the story on the podcast before, but in Canada, one of my first jobs was working selling stair lifts for old people.
I thought you were about to say fish door to door. He was your boss.
But his my sales manager was a Strattonite back in the day.
Wow.
He was a wild character. I wish if we could ever find him to get him on the podcast. He was I would say, like, he drank quite a lot and stuff, and there was a lot of drama. We went into the long story, but there was a lot of drama in the office and all that type of stuff. It was kind of a funny story, a funny first experience when I arrived in Canada. But he had loads of stories about the shenanigans that he used to get up to and all that type of stuff. So that's why when I saw that you had met that guy and put on such a big an event, I thought that was really interesting as well.
Yeah,
but
actually, we went on to like work with him then for a year, did all his digital marketing and everything like that. Mental, like some of the calls you get and some of the stuff he was up to, like, there's a kind of an up and down perspective. Like some days if you ask me on a bad day, I'll be like, "Rah, rah, rah," and then some days on a good day he's like, "Oh, but this." He's just one of those characters that, like, sometimes you get on so well, other times you don't. But fascinating, like all that work with the concerts with musicians and the talks with different speakers. It's amazing. Just like what I'm really, really interested in is people. I love looking at how their face moves when they say certain things, how they actually are versus how they say they are. All that. You've talked about Tony Robbins so much, and he talked about when he was younger, just being so fascinated by looking at people. I have that same fascination, and that actually was the really interesting thing, kind of getting to see these people in action. Really, really interesting.
And so I know that we've really we've dug into loads of different things here today, but we do have kind of a tradition here on the SharkPod. I don't know if Mark has them in front of him.
Yeah, I do.
We do. Mark,
they're laminated, so that's serious.
Yeah, Mark's a laminator for sure. So we have a kind of a lightning round of questions that we ask the sharks to come onto the SharkPod here, just to give us a little bit of an insight. And it's also like at the beginning, I was a little bit skeptical about this when we first started 15 episodes ago, because a lot of these ones on podcasts I listen to can go either way. But what we found by doing this is that we've got like an insight, and there is some there's kind of patterns that happen along here as well. So anyway.
Okay. I'm going to pause you guys for 2 seconds. Awful in terms of like a live recording. I'm going to just quickly go to the bathroom.
Yep, absolutely.
1 minute, and then
Mark, are going to keep going.
Yeah, we'll talk about you. So what you really think of Jamie?
Yeah, great guy.
Weak bladder.
Weak bladder, but everyone has their weaknesses. His is the bladder, it seems. But me and Jamie have 1,900 common connections on LinkedIn.
Really? Yeah.
Which seems strange.
Is he selling tech, slinging tech on the side?
clanging tech on the side. But yeah, do you know what's so interesting about this is that when I was younger, I used to always be wondering who was running these nights. Do you remember? I was probably.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah,
I'd love to do this. Do you know? So
you were thinking of doing one, and what was the one that some of the proceeds would be donated to charity? Was that something you were thinking of?
That the funds are resting in my account and I'm joking. Do
you remember that you had different ideas for?
Yeah, I had this idea that I was going to start like a bar, and it was going to be called kind of like a nightclub / bar, and it was going to be called Feed Bar, and it was going to be like every time you bought a drink, there'd be a little bit of a premium on the drink, and then every time you bought a drink, we'd buy a meal for somebody in Africa that needs it. Do you know what I mean? So it would be kind of that altruistic, one for one, kind of copying the guys who make the Tom's shoes. Sorry, Jamie, we're just talking shite from back.
Like, wow, I left you for 1 minute.
So we were talking. We were saying that when I was younger, when I was going to these places, I was always like, "Who's running this? This is a really cool business to be in." And then me and Mark had talked about an idea years ago about starting just like a bar or a kind of bar nightclub where we would have a premium on the drinks, so it would just be a little bit more, and then we'd buy like a meal for somebody in somewhere who needs it. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of a 1-for-1 model, but to kind of put a little bit of ethics into just getting. So the more you get wasted, the more lives you save. Trying to balance it out a little bit.
It's, like what's cool is seeing all different ideas come to light. Like I love that about when you're traveling and you kind of have your eyes open all the more when you're traveling on your own, and the stories you hear behind businesses and everything like that. It's nice when there is a level of depth behind just the simple function.
Yeah, I like that as well. But
right,
yeah,
you get going on these.
Yeah, Mark, go for it.
Okay, start off nice and easy. What apps do you use the most?
Instagram. Unfortunately, I'd love to say something a bit better. Microsoft To Do is pretty good as well. CNBC in terms of stocks and stuff like that. But yeah, unfortunately, it is Instagram by a dramatic chunk.
Okay. What's the best business idea you never acted upon?
The recruitment agency idea.
Mark,
really? Don't go into that.
Mark will be your
competitors. What time do you get up in the morning, and what time do you go to bed?
I get up at 6 and I go to bed at 10.
Nice.
Yeah, very, very good. If you could do business anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Canggu in Bali. It's
wow.
Heaven. Yeah.
We might come back to that for a quick. Mark, go on.
How much money is enough money?
About 10 million.
Interesting. He's really being quick with these. Very good. What do you fear?
Exact opposite of what we talked about earlier. Unfulfilled potential. It hurts me.
That's the third time that's come up as an answer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Stephen and Chris, actually. Chris Lauder and Stephen Farrell.
Wow.
Did something similar, yeah. And they're two guys that you know.
Yeah. I might be like, here, Chris, stop fucking stealing my answers.
What age do you plan to retire?
I'd love to be retired by 40. I know that is ridiculous, but it's different. Do you mind me pumping into that one a little bit?
No, we'd love you.
No, absolutely, go for it.
Me and Mark have had this conversation, and I'm like, Mark, you got to retire as soon as possible, and he's like, I'll never do that, all that type of stuff. So, Jamie, set him straight.
Yeah, no, like for me, there's a difference. I have to work. I have to work. I have to build a life that I want for myself. I think work is a really, really important part of life. And so the idea of retiring, I just see that as a point of, okay, are you working because you have to work? Or are you working because you want to work? And I really want at that point to be able to be like, no. If I had to stop, if something happened, all would be okay. Those that are dependent on me, my family, they're okay. But what I'm doing now is not because I have to, it's because I want to. And I mean that in, I think that's really important, because I think it's, it's just the norm at the moment that a lot of people are compromised. They can't spend as much time with their families as they like because they have to work. They can't they can't look after themselves as much as they like because they have to work. And those are kind of really strong priorities for me. And so I want to make sure ASAP that I'm in that kind of position.
Very good. Is it who you know or what you know?
What you know.
You can elaborate on that if you want.
Yeah, because look, there's a lot of people that know a lot of people, but they don't know much about themselves, and they make a bollocks of those relationships. Whereas when you know things, people want to know you. And yeah, I think it's always interesting. Somebody talked about networking. A guy called Garvin Smith, amazing guy. He said, Jamie, you know, what happens when you ring the phone? Does the person on the other end of the line look at the phone, grit their teeth and go, ugh, and turn the phone over? Or does the person on the phone look at the phone and go, brilliant, I'm going to have a chat with Jamie, let me answer that? And, you know, let's call a spade a spade. That's based around what you know and what you can do for people. Mm-hmm. And so for me, there has to be some depth behind all those relationships, and the depth is the value you can bring, and what's that value, what you know. So
perfect, great answer.
Okay, 2 more, right?
Thank you.
If you could advise someone to learn one skill, what would it be?
Communication.
Let's say, go ahead.
Communication skills. Think of the amount of like mistakes were made from off the back of ill communication, and how many times we tie ourselves up in knots by just not making our points clearly. I've regularly found myself having a fight with somebody where we're both actually fighting over the exact same thing, we're just communicating it differently. And
how do you think people can improve on that?
By being a little bit more vulnerable, perhaps. By being a little bit more vulnerable, by opening up. I'm relaxing down and perhaps not putting so much pressure on immediacy. Sometimes you're in the right zone to talk, other times you're not. I used to have this really frustrating relationship where when there was an issue, that person needed to resolve the issue now. I'd be like, look, you're not in the right state to talk. Let's have this conversation in 2-3 hours time when we're a little bit more settled. So yeah, and that whole communication space for me is fascinating. And I think, Jesus, just that alone can make such a dramatic impact on everything else.
Okay, this might lead on to the next question. What book would you recommend to the 18-year-old Jamie?
God, you boys are Tony Robbins heads. Unleash the Power Within is pretty damn good. You know, it's all encompassing. The best book I've read most recently is a book called Grow a New Body by Alberto Villoldo. And it's all about getting in touch with yourself, and how perhaps what you're eating is interrupting that connection, and how you can clean up what you're eating to better connect with yourself and bring a greater sense of alignment to everything that you do. Sounds a bit mad, but let's say you have a triple-decker sandwich in O'Brien's. It's going to put you to sleep. And, you know, sometimes...
Often did.
Yeah, often did. And so people are kind of interesting. They're like, oh, no, my diet has no relevance to how I feel. It has everything to do with how you feel. And it can obviously ill affect you, or it can really positively affect you. And so it kind of looks at the diet at the root cause, the root tool that you can use to anchor in all the good that you want for yourself. It's really, really good.
What's the name again? Just so people...
It's Grow a New Body by an author called Alberto Villoldo.
Very good. I must take a look at that.
Yeah. Do. It's amazing. Really, really good.
So Mark, we all good?
Yeah, that's them, yeah.
Perfect.
They're great answers. Thanks, Jamie.
Great answers. You were probably the one that took the lightning round of the answers as seriously as that, which is great. After 15
yeah, I've had the added advantage of like 4 weeks back to back to think about myself. So no, I'm one of those big believers that is, you know, like your strength comes, your inside out reflects itself. So your outside world is a reflection of your inside world. So if you want to manifest things in your outside world, get stuck into your inside world. So those kind of, I'd be looking at kind of questions like that, and any kind of questions. It's actually why I jump when someone's like, hey, can I have a chat, or can I interview or something like that? I jump at it because I think it's a great reflection in terms of where you're at. And so, yeah, that's why I'm kind of jumping at those answers. I'm like, okay, great. It's always kind of valuable when there's one that you get really stuck on. It's like, wow, that's where I need to work on. But
very good.
Cool. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for all your time this morning. I know We said about an hour, but it's almost an hour and a half now. This is a very typical thing that happens on the SharkPod. We get stuck. We get excited about the interesting guests that we have, and we kind of lose ourselves. So that's kind of the magic of podcasting. So I don't want to take that out of it, but I do appreciate all the time you gave us. There'll be a SharkPod T-shirt that looks a little bit like that, except it might fit you.
Sweet.
So this might be on the way to you guys. We'll get your address and stuff like that afterwards. We'll send that out. But otherwise, I wish you all the best of luck with everything that you're doing in the future as well. Hopefully, our paths will cross and throughout our careers and stuff like that. But
yeah, we get a coffee in when things get back to normal.
Yeah, I'd love that, guys. I'd love that. And just look for any of your listeners listening on. If they like anything that they hear or they want to connect, I'm kind of a complete open door in that respect. So
where can they find you?
Yeah, easy way to get in touch is just jamiewhite.com. My email is literally jamie@jamiewhite.com, and my Instagram is @jamiewhite. So it is as clear and simple as can be.
Perfect.
And just one more thing, is there anything coming up, any big event in the next half a year or a year?
Yeah, funny enough, I was chatting with somebody. I had a load of events planned, and then they all got kind of shelved, everything. But I'm working today, tomorrow, which is mad, Easter Saturday and Easter Sunday, I do this event called Fresh Resolutions. It's very much to kind of complement people's ambitions at the start of the year. And I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to do an event like that for where people are right now, because there's such a natural reset that's kicked in. So I don't know if you're familiar with a guy called Colin McCarthy working in Tito. Tito is a fantastic ticketing platform, and they've created Vito, which is a virtual conferencing platform now. And they're trialing it out. They gave me a call and said, look, would you like to be one of the first ones to trial this virtual conferencing software? And I thought, interesting, that'd be cool to do an event in this space. So that's possibly something I'm going to launch this week and hopefully host next week.
Brilliant.
Which is pretty quick. I suppose by the time you get this out, it'll probably be posted. But with events, it's all about timing, and there's a really important thing right now is to compliment people for where they're at, and it's such an opportunity to have a really positive effect on people. So it'd be great to get in there. So fingers crossed that comes together. Yeah,
those Tito guys it's an amazing operation they've got there. We're building a integration with one of my partners with HubSpot with those guys right now.
Right.
There's 12 or 14 people there, and they did like 100 million in ticket sales.
Yeah.
It's like crazy business. It's one of those kind of gems that we don't really talk too much about in Ireland, about the little success stories if they look small, but they're a small giant, as you might call it. But I wish you best luck in trialing out that stuff as well, and with the event. And if we can do anything, well, let us know, and we can put it out on our socials as well. And this will be out on Wednesday, and we'll take it from there. But thanks very much for all your time, and let's keep in touch.
Very
Thanks,
cool.
Jamie.
Pleasure, an absolute pleasure. Have a great day ahead.
Cheers.
Enjoy. Peace.
Cool. All right. So done.